Well, I would say, first of all, we open the floor for immediate questions, remarks, reactions to what has been presented. I think it's complementing the discussions we had already in the morning with some more details about it from the network perspective. Research we have been doing. I think we heard quite some good explanations about the perception I mentioned this morning about ACDM not working, but actually it's the volatility, which has a number of causes that we're working on. I think a very important message that Gianni mentioned in the end, it is three main areas where we have to look at, where everybody has to make a contribution to the mitigation for this summer. So, are there any initial reactions from your side? Questions?
Yes, I have several. First this morning we talked about the cherry picking. Is this by a level capping or a requesting of delaying a flight?
A STAM, short-term ATFCM measure can be a time, flight can be level capped, can be rerouted out.
Okay, then I have the next question for this one. If you're talking about STAM, and I need to delay my EOBT because of an issue in the network, how does it work with CDM? Because I can update my EOBT, but the CDM system responds on TOBT. And as an airline, I'm not out of my own home base, I can do, but from outstations I cannot update my TOBT. So now you're requesting me to contact my ground handler to adjust the TOBT instead of having the own influence on my own flight. So my request to NM is to have the influence from the airline by updating the EOBT, that the system of you guys will respond with a new CTOT or adjust the TOBT at the CDM airport. Something to think about.
Yeah, probably, if I may, as I'm heading the airport unit, a short response to that one. You're referring to having a ground handler working on your behalf. So you should have some control as an airline, I would assume. The ground handler is a representative of you, so it should be properly trained to update accordingly. Same procedure as on your home base.
But you're requesting an airline to delay a flight. Now you're saying to the same airline, you do have to do additional work, so adjust the TOBT at a certain station. So you're requesting me to call the ground handler to update the TOBT to a specific time. So you're putting additional workload on our behalf.
Okay, so you're requesting automation in those specific cases, I understand.
On behalf of the airline.
Yeah, okay,
Correct.
We'll take that on board. Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah. Next one.
I have the RAT restriction versus adverse weather. So you have a RAT restriction, and it was mentioned by the presentation from Gianni, flight out of Amsterdam and Brussels. Those are level capped. What if there is severe weather that we need to overfly the adverse weather? Is there a RAT relaxation, and how is this managed?
I think that there is a widespread convincement that the RAD restrictions are carved in stone. Once it has been released or decided by the NSP, it stays there. That's not the case. So it's up to the FMP to release the RAD restriction depending on the weather condition, on the traffic condition. That's what we are saying since many years. RAD restrictions are valid whenever there is a stability. When the traffic is okay, everything is fine, and you have a kind of certainty. But of course, you're right, when the weather impacts a specific area and the RAD restriction is pushing flight into a thunderstorm, that shall be released. It's quite clear. Like it happens for the French strike, in Marseille there is a RAD restriction that every time the FMP looks after it, and during the French strike that is cancelled. So this is a job that we expect to be done by the flow management positions and not by the network manager, because we do not have the local view. We have the network view. We know everything. Yes, we do know why and what and when this is happening or when it will happen. But then at the end, there are certain things that, of course, are delegated to the NSP. And we are talking about traffic complexity locally, the weather over there at the airport or en route. They have the last say on that kind of thing. So I invite all the FMP, thank you for that. I will add it tomorrow on my slide, to look after two eliminate or cancel or suspend temporarily a rad restriction when the situation necessitates. Thank you.
You have more? Yes, please.
I have more. On the presentation of JET, it said minimizing CTOT updates. What do you mean by minimizing CTOT update? Is it the amount of CTOT or the times? Because you can minimize CTOT updates, but that's reflecting back to the airlines, creating delays that we will probably not like.
It was more a general phrase. I think that the slide I showed had the 3 or 4 broad titles, so it's probably more reducing the number of CTOP updates. So if I take the example, I said regulation changes. So as Johnny mentioned, you know, sometimes 400 regulations in there with frequent changes. You know, that is driving quite a large proportion of the SRM message that you saw on the graph. So, you know, it's a no-brainer that if you have smarter regulations, because some of the regulations, as we understand, are covering a flight will fly through 6, 7 regulated areas sometimes in the 300,000 minute day. There were several regulations affecting one flight. So if we can be smarter, and I think that's the objective of tomorrow's discussion, how can we be smarter on how we regulate, and how can the FMP practice improve? I think Johnny put the, you know, or Munich put using the system as a simulation. You know, if we can cut that out, if we can be smarter with the regulations, that will reduce the number, and that will have some way to go on reducing this jumping CTOT and airports having sequence problems. So it wasn't in the specifics of an individual flight, so it's the broader term of being smarter on how we address those 3 or 4 issues.
Okay, the reason I was asking that, because at several CDM meetings it was raised that specifically the German airports do not like the every minute update of better CTOTs. So out of an airline point of view, you want to have the best CTOT available at any minute. If the system is looking for an update every minute, as an airline point of view, you might know this and you will not send out requests for improvement of flight is in the REA status, because then when you know the system, you know what will happen, and requesting an improvement on a REA flight doesn't have the most added value then anymore.
Martin, it's a good point you make. The true revision process was reduced from 5 minutes to 1 minute to allow you guys to take advantage of any delay improvements that might be available. But of course, there's a balance to be struck, and this is something, and I think Frankfurt have made this point to us on several occasions, that now that's happening, they are getting more and more SRM messages, which, as was mentioned before, makes sequencing very difficult. But then the airlines are saying, yeah, but we want the delay improvements. So there has to be a balance, and I think more work needs to be done on understanding exactly where those balances are struck, because you can't have your cake and eat it. There will be occasions where you may lose potential for delay improvement, but you will have more stability. And I think that's not just in this particular case, but in the wider context of everything that we're talking about here. It is that balance.
Pardon, just to complement what Chris said, the true revision process, Martin, is not the root cause of the problem. The true revision process is working now since a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, and has generated considerable delay saving for the airlines. Became a problem this year, a problem in brackets, because the root cause are 468 regulations. So flights that are subject to 7, 8, 10 regulations sometimes. Obviously, every time that this regulation is modified, there is an update of the CTOT. So 54, how many per one flight? This is unacceptable. So it's not the true revision process. What shall be fixed is the number, a lower number of regulations that we are quite confident to achieve during the summer. Again, you are anticipating matters that will be discussed tomorrow and will be debated tomorrow, and we will show you what you are going to do also internally in order to mitigate this volatility that, of course, is a major issue Volatility equal predictability, loss of predictability. And predictability is loss of confidence for the FMPs and the NSPs and the controllers. So it's an excellent point. It was a very good and excellent evaluation of the problem. We know the causes, and of course we are hardly working to fix partially, because obviously we cannot make miracles. We cannot eliminate 350 regulations per day because the network needs it. But at least on the side of volatility, we are confident that less SRM will be sent next year to each flight.
Finished? That for you?
Yeah, just a quick point on what Jenny said. Ludovic is not DSNA, sorry. Quick point on what Jenny said just before on the RAD flexibility. And Jenny is right in a way that we do have some means of relaxing some RAD in very specific situation. And unfortunately, it's not right, because it has not only happened on very specific cases like Marseille strike, where we have a process, it took time to put it in place. To answer Martin's request, and this is something we have been really requesting for years, is to have something more flexible to relax RAD. Us at DSNA, we want to do that to help the AO on day. And it's not possible, because whenever we want to remove a RAD restriction in the morning for the afternoon due to weather situation, for example, we have zero mean to inform the users of this. And it does not exist actually right now. And we've been talking about it in the RMG for years, and we don't have yet the means to transmit the information to AO CFSPs for them to be able to plan accordingly. So this is something we have to build all together, because I think our FMPs are really eager to give some more opportunities if needs be, but we don't have the technical means to transmit the information to the network and for the network to react accordingly. So probably we'll discuss a bit more next session in the afternoon, but it's something important. I think everybody should work in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You want to say something?
Yeah, I countersign this. So because of course that's how it should be. So every RAD restriction, every FMP should be able to cancel or modify a RAD restriction online with the previous advice, with the proper advice to the aircraft operators. Because don't forget that whenever a RAD restriction is applied, then depending on if the flight plan is present into the system or not, it may not be even visible to you. Okay, so this is a very good technical change that we are looking for, but we have to be very careful, and this is not something that we are going to have for next summer. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, just a comment on what Martin was saying about the... Martin, attention. Sorry. Martin, maybe I misunderstood it, but you were saying that as an airline, you update the EOBT, and that you would have to call the handling agent to update the TOBT. I thought most of the CDM airports, if you update the EOBT, TOBT will automatically update it. Well, at least in quite a few of the airports, but not the other way. If you update the TOBT, you may have to contact the airline unless you have subscribed to the EUROCONTROL EOBT update service. So I think it may be
it's
sort
only
of different airports.
Two airports on this moment. You have Oslo and you have Amsterdam. The other airports, you do, when you update the EOBT, no TOBT is adjusted. If it's less than 15 minutes.
Okay, we'll follow that up. Geoffrey.
Just the 2 points from Ryanair. The second point was actually just covered. I'll come on to that in a sec. But first of all, I'd like to actually say a thank you to Gianni, that I don't think I've heard EU261 mentioned so much as I have in this room as this morning. I wouldn't mind doing the hands up exercise again at the end of the day and see what the change in results are. We've also heard the word customer a lot more, and I don't mean customer as in airline or airspace users, I mean passengers, and the question of why we're here doing what we're doing. I think it's good to start hearing that appreciation. And just a final point to jump on the back about the point of relaxed RAD measures. Obviously, there's a discussion of how honest is it in reality that you can do it, but it's just to say that even if it is possible, it is hard-coded in a flight planning system. So regardless of what's done on the day, there's still not the functionality for us to plan accordingly straight away. I think we're aware of that everything needs to line up there for that method to be effective.
Yeah, I think it's a possible mitigation solution, but it has some effects which are not rectified quite easily. Anything more from the floor? I look around so that I don't. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Martin Böttch, Head Operations at EUROCONTROL Vienna. Maybe another input and not a different discussion at the end, it leads to the same, the complexity issues. To stabilize volatility, to stabilize the amount of delay and stuff like that, we did several measures the last year. We're in the planning phase for this year. It is not pleasant for the airspace user, I fully agree. We are moving away from vertical flight efficiency, we are level capping flights, we are detouring flights and stuff like that in order to minimize delay. But what we, and I think it's not only Austria facing the situation more and more, is a rather high increase in complexity. We are moving the flights from the natural profile. We have a rather late top of climb. We have an early descent, either by regulations, on the other hand by flight planning done by the airspace user for good reason, just to circumnavigate some regulated airspace. But what happens at the end of the day is all of us, we set up the sector capacity values for some kind of regular traffic flow. That means departures from several airports are approaching those airspaces in the cruise phase already, and not being level capped rather low. And at the end of the day, the user would like to fly at the final cruising altitude. So someone has to do the job to bring those flights up. Another one has to do the job to bring those flights down again. But we are moving more and more away from the natural profile, and we putting the burden to do some hard work with those flights to areas they didn't expect that. And what we see more and more is a knock-on effect. We are moving the issue from one ACC to another one. By the end of the day, this spoils capacity all over. And this is there's no solution for the next year. And I really have the strong fear, not even for 2020. But at the end of the day, we need to tackle those issues as well. We are spoiling capacity by, let's call it, unnatural profiles. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that remark. I think that's going into the presentation later on from Razvan on the airspace study. So I think, yeah, some fundamental changes. It's true. We have to look further out in the future. Yes, please.
And we do this exactly the same by using STAM measures and stuff like that as well. So just as an immediate answer to Johnny, I work on STAM as well, fully agreed, but it's the same. We are moving flights to airspaces we don't expect them in the overall planning.
Thank you. I look around the room. Otherwise, I have still two cards here. Maybe as a first summary, what I'm taking out of the discussion so far from this morning and from now, I think I have two main things that are stuck in my mind. One is we're chasing our tails. I think that's some kind of a common agreement, like ANSPs together with NMOC trying to improve the management of the network, whilst then airlines trying to improve their individual flights, which can be contradicting. We need a lot of flexibility, but also we want to have stability, which is also somewhat contradicting. So that's something where we need to find solutions for, and that means, as Johnny mentioned, we have, or Chris, I think it was, we have at a certain moment of time, we have to make a trade-off. So not everyone can get everything they want. We have to make a trade-off to get some stability into the system. So I have two cards here. One, I think, is addressed to the European Commission, which we have in the room. So it was said about 16 million flights by 2035. I think that's the ones that are not accommodated. As in the challenges of growth. So ATFM crisis is serious, but it's short term. So it's for the next coming years until staffing levels have become better, until airspace changes have been done, but then should not be such a big issue. But the real long-term crisis are the airports and capacity at airports. That's how I understand this. So the question is, where is the performance scheme for airports? E.g., don't issue more slots than capacity. That's related to airport slots, I assume. So I think there's one question on performance scheme for airports. No.
The airports should not rush into the answer, so please. You can have some time before answering that question.
Okay. Another one which I think is a long debate, it's also more on the political level, only one rate, one fee rate, so minimum cost disturbs the network when it overloads sectors with extra mileage routing. So it means, yes, airline behavior is driven by cost, by the unit rates. That's a long-standing issue, so it's not taking actually the shortest route, which is an indication, but it's taking a route which is based on their business model, the most efficient one. So that's a point. Someone wants to comment on that one? You want? Yes, please.
Yeah, not a full direct answer, but just to update. In the new regulation, the performance scheme, in the performance regulation, the charging now will address not the flight plan but the actual route flown. That means that whoever provides the service to you gets the money, rather than as before or as now, because this will be effective 1st January 2020. Before it was you had a flight plan, and then if you actually moved from that flight plan, you went into other airspaces, the money still went to the ones where the flight plan actually was intending you to fly. Now, that doesn't solve the point that basically airlines will look for the shortest, for the cheapest solution. But okay, that's part of the deal. At a certain point, will the airline accept to fly for a shorter route or a cheaper route and get a delay? Well, how will it work? So basically, it is easy for us, for the Commission, to say, okay, you don't go for this, you don't go for the cheapest, you go for the straightest, you go for this. There's a lot of discussion ongoing there, but at the moment, it is up to the airline. Now that we have put together who gives you the service gets the money, the next point is, okay, in that, going that route, you might have, it is cheaper, but you might get a delay. There are discussions ongoing, there are thoughts ongoing, that basically you have a fixed price for an origin destination, and if you then you want to move or fly in a less congested airspace, then you might get a discount. There's this type of discussion that is ongoing in terms of the long term. I know the long-term question was an airport question, which is more difficult, but as part of the new system, or part of a system where the airspace is optimized, where the technology is supporting and getting the workload down for controllers so that they can do more, there is an issue also of predictability, of 4D trajectories, and understanding how the aircraft want to operate. But there has to be, there may be also financial incentives in order, i.e., if you fly this way, you might get some discount because you are offloading congested areas. So there's nothing definite, but there's discussion.
Thank you, Joe. I don't know, Jean-Marc, do you want to comment on the question, or for you, please? Yes?
Yeah, so thank you for giving us some extra time, but unfortunately we still are not able to answer this question. I would like to take that home and then come back to you on this, because I cannot give you the concrete answer to this question.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, thank you. Jens Albeck, Scandinavian Airlines. Just a comment to what Joe just said. We are actually changing a little bit now, so that we have now to learn our pilots what is the pricing of Europe, so that they are aware then to say no to a shortcut offered into an expensive airspace. I foresee this is going to be a problem somehow, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's a good initiative. It's actually showing where we need to collaborate, and I think it was mentioned this morning also in presentations. explain each other what is the background on your individual action and who does it affect. I think is quite an important thing, and it's the same from the controller side, as you mentioned. Don't offer shortcuts when it probably disturbs the entire trajectory and then negatively affects neighboring ACC. So I think that's the kind of awareness that needs to be raised at operational level. So I think that's a good step forward. I have a related question coming back also to the airport part, which is directed at our colleagues from Lisbon Airport, but also for other airports valid. Is the question, are you not starting every day with more demand, in brackets airport slots, than you are able to handle? So that's the question. I don't know if you can respond to that. Yes, please. I think it was, do you want to say, or want to give the floor to Didier first?
Maybe
Didier?
On the principle, so my name is Didier Hock. I'm the airport slot coordinator for Brussels, representing the EUACA, the European Airport Coordinators Association. Basically, you cannot blame the coordinator to distribute more slot than the capacity. The capacity that is given to the coordinator for distributing slots is the result of an analysis that is made, a capacity analysis that is made by the ATC for the land side, and so the air side, sorry, and by the airport for the land side. So the coordinator distributes the slots according to this capacity. So normally, if the actors who are managing the capacity delivers a correct information, you cannot deliver more slot than the capacity is able to handle. But then, of course, you are putting on the front line the question of competitivity of the airport, competitivity of the main carrier, and so on and so on. And that's where we have, I think, one of the problems that we have nowadays in the network is that you are conflicting between two actors, the airlines, the airports, who are fighting for money, for making profit, for making, benefits, and that's fair. I mean, that's only a point. And on the other side, people who are more fighting for making the best usage of the capacity or the efficiency of their system without having this competition issue and this rentability issue on the other side. So yes, it may be that at some airports the number of flights that are scheduled is higher than the technical capacity that you can deliver, but it's a choice made by this local network to go along those lines. And we have examples here and there where you have systematically, every morning in the peak, you have restrictions on arrivals or on departures, even if all the flights are scheduled according to the airport slot allocated and things like that. So I think that when you ask this question, you have to ask yourself if the system locally is working properly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to complement that from the experience that we have with working with airports and with the coordinators. I think it's quite difficult, but also quite obvious, I think. We had a discussion, I think, 2 years ago in the user forum. That point was mentioned as well about injecting additional flights into the system and nobody knowing where they will be flying, which means you cannot prepare for it in terms of service. As we have seen in the presentation from Francine this morning, with the chart where slots are still available or not available according to the declared capacity they have, the system is close to being at their capacity. And what we know also from a number of studies that we've done for airports and with airports is it is quite clear in the delay figures that we're seeing is when you're coming close to capacity, delays, when they occur, they shoot exponentially. So there's no gradual climb of delays, but it's going up exponentially. And I think it's also quite a good example to say, even if you have the best plan in place, when then airlines are forced to take very long routes. Look at the example you had in your presentation, Geoffrey, this morning with the long route overseas to avoid Central Europe. It's a much longer route, which means, of course, your arrival time will differ from what you originally have planned and scheduled. And that means then for an airport, if all the other flights for this hour where your flight is coming are coming at the same time, you have an overdemand. And then potentially you start to regulate. So that's the impact of operations to the planning, which means the planning was still okay, but at the edge, which means a single flight can mess up your whole thing. So that's something that we need to work on. There are methods, and we know that some of the larger airports start to trial those. For example, for managing the first wave. We know also from investigations of our quota team that the first morning wave is usually a big issue and can carry through the whole day, particularly for the congested airports. So managing the early arrivals, the first flight in the morning, the long-haul fleets, like implementing target times for those flights, can help to take a little bit of the strain throughout the day. So these are possibilities. I know that Heathrow is looking into it, CDG is looking into it, Frankfurt wants to start looking into it as well. Something potentially to be discussed for Lisbon. So I think there are some methods where we can still work a little bit with what we have. We're getting to the strain, but it's a combination, as Gianni said, it's a combination of measures that we have to bring together. And that's why the collaboration is key. Exchanging with each other, informing on what is the impact of what one is doing to the other. I think that's the key. Jens, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to maybe precise what I was saying before, because I think it was misunderstood. I don't think necessarily it's a good idea that the pilots has to know about the pricing scheme in Europe before they decide to take a direct through a more expensive airspace or not, because it adds complexity to the cockpit and also to the decision making in the cockpit. And frankly speaking, it's all over changing, and we have systems calculating this. But now we're kind of turning this upside down. So now it's the pilot who has to decide: is this a cheap or good shortcut I get here, or am I lured into something where we have to pay a lot of money?
Yeah, I think I fully understand that, but I think as the system is growing, as we have more options also in technology and exchanging information, I think also the roles are changing and evolving, be it for air traffic controllers going towards more air traffic management rather than pure control. It's the same on the pilot side. The economic part has a big impact on what they're doing and the decision making, which has pros and cons, no doubt about that.
We need EUROCONTROL. Yeah, Jens's point about the direct leads nice into my question, because that, of course, that direct will cause an intruder somewhere else, in somebody else's sector, and that brings me to my question back to the chart on that. I have a few questions about the statistics in that. Intruders, as you call them, to stay with your vernacular, obviously have either a temporal or a geospatial cause, i.e. either I'm at a different level from the one that was shown in my original flight plan, or that you calculated in the trajectory, or I'm there earlier or later. Either way, the traffic that is obviously the intruder is also missing in an adjacent sector. You had two lines in there, one the traffic anticipated not showing up, and then the intruders. I suspect that they largely even out, because unless somebody went missing mid-air or you have a molecule transporter invented, that's the only way that can happen. So this is being presented in the realm of, well, that's unpredictable, it's an intruder, but it seems to me arguably that this is very much predictable. So these are the predictable unpredictabilities, and I'm picking up from the colleague's comment from Lot earlier today that maybe we should sort of accept that more and rather deal with it than complain about it. So the term intruder is obviously already implying a complaint, when in fact it's not. You're just swapping capacity from one end to the other end. So, you know, one solution could be you combine these sectors and now it's no longer an intruder. If you know this is happening continuously, and your chart was saying, actually that's pretty much predictable, for the Budapest sector, for instance, the example that you had, what work is being done around that, other than creating charts and complaining that there are intruders? Are you suggesting to them, well, given these statistics, that you have these level changes all the time, statistically, why don't you change your sectors accordingly, and then these intruders will magically disappear? Or what is there anything you can do, and is there anything you are doing? That's really my question around that. Or the question goes away if I was completely wrong in my interpretation. So over to you.
Yeah, I think to a degree you're right. The charts I showed, I think the light blue was someone else's intruder, and the orange was someone else's avoider. Question is, do they balance out? Yes or no. If you're intruding into someone who doesn't have a problem, then it's not an issue. But what we're hearing anecdotally is it is a problem for places like Budapest. So they're coming from somewhere where they weren't expected. Maybe someone else is having a good day at the same time. We don't know. But the interesting thing is, what are we doing about it? We're trying to, as I said, understand the problem first. I mean, there are lots of solutions flying around. I think you've just mentioned one or two there. Until we really understand the problem, and this is the first time we've had data to actually build these charts. So you say, you know, apart from showing charts, this is the first step in understanding the problem. And that's the issue. We've had initiatives in the past like File It, Fly It, you know, and things like that, which the statistics start to say, well, actually, in certain places, that might make sense. Maybe not a broad brush approach. So this is the starting point. Understanding the traffic dynamics, which we've never had. We've only built the data set and started using it end of last year, this year. And the action you'll see tomorrow is that we want to make that data set available to some of the FMPs. And I alluded to it in my example where we saw the lead time, the anticipation time. It could be quite as simple as that. As you say, if there's a trend where the flight from Paris to Romania is always an intruder, you know, and you always see that maybe it's somewhere in French airspace that it's causing, is that a phone call or an arrangement you can make to say, look, you guys are causing a problem? So I think we're starting the discussion on what is causing the issue and potentially what could be done procedurally. There may be other more technical solutions to solve, but understanding the problem is milestone one for me.
I'm a little bit confused about the conclusion here. So if that flight from Paris is always earlier, and I presume it's not that one flight that is causing the sector count to tick over, so you look at that, you're always wrong with your predictions on the sector count, and the sector count is a consequence of staffing, because you do a prediction, you say, okay, well, this is what I'm expecting, so I'm staffing accordingly, but I'm continuously wrong because this flight from Paris is always earlier, and then you can go back to the airline and say, well, don't start earlier. You could also look at it from the other side. Well, maybe change your staffing according to the actual traffic or what I've learned. So there's always two sides to that coin. And I heard you say, well, that flight should change, but yeah, maybe that. And that's about time. Obviously, the other one was altitude. And if you've got an intruder on another sector, well, the sector it was supposed to be in is probably also in your airspace, not this one controller, but the guy sitting next to you who is above you or below you. So it seems to be in the realm of the control of the ACC. You know, they've lost a traffic in one, if it's an altitude change, then they've lost one from the guy sitting right or left of him to the other person. So it seems to be under control of that ACC to deal with that. It doesn't strike me as why is this a key problem. Both elements seem to be doable. I'm just trying to understand.
Let me try to explain again why it is a problem. We have two sectors. Both of them are reaching their limit. And both of them, you know, there is more demand, then they're close to the demand, or even there's more. As soon as one flight moves from one sector to another sector, you have overloaded the second sector, maybe even more than it should have been. And the one that you vacated has already issued a regulation because it expected you there. So actually, you've lost the capacity and you've delayed others, even though there was no need for it to be delayed because the aircraft moved. So I think in a more fundamental way, the future of ATM in Europe is about 4D trajectories. And business trajectories and understanding where aircraft will be in time, because then the systems can calculate where to expect the flights and the controller workload. Then he starts to see what's happening on time. We seem to be saying, yes, in theory it's good for the trajectories to have planned, but once the aircraft is in the air, we do what we like. And I'm not saying just the pilot. We don't take care of the others. Yes, you talked, ACCs or controllers in different sectors should be talking to each other. But controllers can be busy. And basically, they've moved someone, and that's additional coordination that now needs to happen. So it is not why do you create that additional workload, which eventually reduces the overall capacity? So I think what Jed was saying, when we look for things which are happening on a regular basis, we're trying to solve the problem now, or in the next months, couple of years. But I think we need to look a bit further. For the trajectories and business trajectories and basically a contract eventually between where you want to be, where the airline wants to be and what ATM has to deliver. And even if then that is even more linked to the service and the cost of what the airline is paying for that. At the same time, you put in flexibility in there, you put in choices that you make once you're airborne. We are losing this concept. Now, if the concept changes, it's something else, but I think that's where the developments are going.
Thank you, Joe. Anna, please.
I would like to add, we were talking about sectors and aircrafts moving from sector to sector, but even on an approach, sometimes you don't move sector to sector, you just move during the timeline. And for example, you can have an excess of demand of 1 hour because you are counting on flight plans and estimated times on the flight plans, and then for some reason that estimated time is not correct and the flight arrives 1 hour later. So you regulated 1 hour that it was not needed, and all flights got CTOTs at their origins with no need. And the next hour that it was okay, you get an over demand, and it should be regulated, and it's not. So it's not just sector to sector, even in time. We need flight plan adherence and predictability, so we know when someone is going to be in our airspace.
Okay, thank you. Johnny, you wanted to say something?
Just first of all, the intruder is today the official term is unanticipated traffic, because because intruder of course seems a bit offensive. On the other side, what I wanted to say that if you file a flight plan, an airline files a flight plan with specific times and vertical profile, there are hundreds of reasons why this profile cannot be matched. Can be a separation from the controller, can be a direct routing, you name it. But again, first of all, we should start again doing our job. I would like to see the buffers disappearing from the flight plans. Because again, if I have an arrival time at an airport, airport X, I don't want to make names, and we all know that the main user of that airport adds the possible delay tomorrow into the elapsed time, what are we talking about? So we are simply accepting, no, what? A fake data. And you cannot tell me then I have to fix looking at historical data because this flight is arriving 10 minutes earlier every day and that day, and I have to take into account that data. No. I want to take into account the flight plan data. That is a contract. Full stop. That's how it should be. I'm not, of course, we all live in the real world and we know perfectly it's not like that, but that's how it should be. Reliability, adherence, flight plan adherence. Tomorrow we will see again, and I'm sure you will laugh about the cases that I will show on the screen. I don't know, maybe pilots or dispatchers are asking the pilot to make a tour around the mountains and then they are sent straight. You will see tomorrow. So these kind of things have to be eliminated because even one single flight creates unpredictability. And if one specific sector, the controller has already 5 or 6 flights additional to what it was expected, and it is last minute and they cannot do anything, the 6th flight additional, that can be an unanticipated traffic, may create a dramatic situation.